Thanks, Connor.
Thank you.
Hey, good afternoon, everyone. Good morning to everyone on the West Coast. In this webinar, we'll be talking about structural roof design with the roof and ceiling loads, as well as how to use ClearCalcs to maximize your workflow and minimize the time you spend on doing repetitive tasks. So what we're going to cover is general types of roofs we find in residential construction. And then once we know the type of roof we're going to use, we're going to discuss load determination and kind of how we determine what load goes on the roof. We'll touch a bit upon the differences between IRC tables and ClearCalcs, and generally when would be a good time to use either. And then we're going to go into a more ClearCalcs focused and setting project defaults. And then we'll go over a couple of examples with gable roof with ties or gable roofs with ridge beam. And then if we have time, a hip and valley rafter. So these are the 6 basic type of roof lines. As you can see, some of them are quite similar, like the shed roof and the flat roof. Both use just repeating joists sitting on girders. The one we're focusing on today will be gable roof and hip roof. So the chances are most, like if you've designed a house, you've seen most of these roof types. And so in ClearCalcs, we have presets for the hip roof and the gable roof and the flat roof. And so we'll go through an example on how to do that later on. And so once we have our schematic roof type, and we have to determine what type of loads go on it. So depending on the final finishes, the dead loads on the roof will be different. There are rules of thumb based on what generally goes on top of a residential construction roof. But for most efficient framing, say you want to shave off a couple of inches in depth for your beams, then it might actually make sense to dig into the roofing materials. And if you know exactly what materials will go on the roof, then it's probably more efficient and accurate to use that. Another feature we'd like to hear your thoughts on is a load template where you can pick materials to determine, like, hey, I want tile on my roof, and maybe like, and we'll tell you the density of tile. And if you say, oh, it's a 3/4 inch tile, which is quite a heavy tile, then we can just apply that as a dead load onto your roof beams. We'd love to hear your thoughts, and if that's a feature you think you would use, or if that's something or what you would like to see in that feature. And then other than dead loads, loads to be considered in roof design include live load, snow load, wind load, and rain load. And these come straight out of your local building code. I live in Canada, so we're always governed by snow load. There's like 8 feet of snow every winter on the roofs. And so my general load combination would include dead and snow. And we'll see how ClearCalcs handles roof calculations in our example. And then in the next slide, we'll see differences. We'll talk about slight differences between IRC tables and ClearCalcs. So I'm sure you guys are familiar with this table of rafter spans for common lumber species. And the tables work great for quick designs, or kind of for back of napkin, or if you're in your first like preliminary schematic design. And they're great for common wood species. And they make assumptions on they make certain assumptions that are actually all reproducible in ClearCalcs. So some key differences we want to mention is that, so in ClearCalcs, by default, we include self-weight on top of the dead load. And this is because we can accurately calculate dead load based on the member you put in. Whereas the table includes the self-weight in the dead load. So if you're applying dead load in ClearCalcs for mapping to the IRC table, remember to subtract the self-weight of your beam. And then for rafters, the tables don't have consideration to roof pitch. In ClearCalcs, we consider this, and the higher roof pitch means that you're actually, for the same plan dimensions, you're actually getting a longer span, and we also consider higher deflections. And in particular with the roof pitch, we apply gravity loads over the inclined length instead of the plan length. So live and snow loads are generally overestimated. And then to correct for this, you can multiply your loads by the cosine of the incline of the pitch. And this can actually be done within the inputs. If you type in a number and type, so all of our inputs include calculator functions, very similar to if you used Excel, where you type in a formula and it'll do the calculation. So yeah, so then we can talk about setting project defaults in ClearCalcs. And actually, let me just pull up the actual page instead of the static slide. We'll go through kind of a general use case. So when you open a project in ClearCalcs, you automatically get routed to the project details page. And in this page, you can set the project name. And actually the important thing we want to set here is the building standard and the unit system. So here we've put in US building standard. We also support Australian, New Zealand, Eurocode, and Canadian standard. But for this webinar, we'll talk about the US one. And from here, we can see under add new calculation, there's a project defaults page. And there are a few areas I'd like to highlight here. So the design code can be set here, and it's based actually on, from my understanding, is based on the date your permit is approved. So if your permit is approved for before the IRC 2021 comes into effect, it becomes grandfathered into whichever permit it has been approved under. And here we can see that, so if I pick IRC 2021, it tells me the full code name is the International Residential Code, and we're in the 2021 version. And we have a couple of notes here. In the section under this, this has to do with, most of these parameters have to do with setting deflection. So if there's flexible ceiling, or if there's like brittle finished walls, that will impact how much deflection and what the absolute amount of deflection you want it to be to prevent wall and tile cracking. And so these are deflection limits. If we continue scrolling down along the left-hand side, in building geometry, we can set our roof slope or roof pitch, as well as default rafter spacing. And this will come in when we link rafters to a ridge beam. And we can actually link rafters as a line load in a ridge beam, and this will allow, then this spacing is what the rafters will be set at. and the rest of these are for floors, as well as what the maximum roof depth is. So this will filter out beams that are beyond this depth. And then on the right-hand side, we have default roof loads. So we've referenced some rules of thumb as well as the building code in terms of based on the type of roof you have, what the expected superimposed dead load is, as well as the live load, snow load, and wind loads. And when we design beams and framing members, we'll automatically take into consideration load combinations. So for this one, let's say we'll use flat or rise less than 4 inches. And then we have these dead loads here. And it's cool to note that these loads are actually linked into our roof member designs. And if they change, all of your roof framing loads will change. And so that's just a quick handy way to change your superimposed loads or any other loads if you find that, like, oh, actually I have more material on my roof, or I have less material on my roof. And it's, yeah, a quick and easy way to do that, and will automatically rerun all the calculations. So if you have a ceiling, we also consider default ceiling loads. So ceilings can be suspended off the roof framing, and because of that, we'll impose the ceiling loads onto the roof load if required, like as an option. And then so similarly to the roof loads, we can set a type, and it'll give us default load, and these can all be changed based on your specific designer needs. And then the floor loads can be done similarly. So this is the default project settings. Yeah, feel free to ask any questions you have on this. I'm happy to go over it.
I think something, Eva, with the project defaults is, one, it comes in handy for everybody listening when you're doing new construction. And Eva might have already said this, to be honest. I've been messaging a lot of you guys back, so spacing out. But it also comes in handy on the back end of a project when you're changing values, or if you have a customer, or maybe the permit reviewer is asking you to modify values, you could just modify them once and know they apply to the rest of your calculation. So very sorry, Eva, if you already said that. I've been messaging a lot of people back here.
Yeah, for sure. That's and then yeah, actually, when we go through the gable roof design, this is something we can touch upon. But so just going back to the PowerPoint. Yeah, so next we'll talk about an example with gable roof and roof ties. So in this example, we'll design the rafter as well as the collar tie.